quickly transition on North River Road to a rural environment. And there aren't a lot of landowners there, but private landowners, especially farmers and people that own woodlots, they're not too excited about public access. While Maine has a great liability protection law for property owners, our core business is helping to protect the landscape. So if the people who own the landscape say, listen, I don't want trails right now, we respect that. So when we do planning processes, we try to focus on things that are more easily achievable near term, because that's where we can sort of push the momentum. So I'll certainly share with the Historical Society when we set that public meeting date to share sort of the draft report and draft recommendations. And I'd love to have folks here support some of those efforts.
Jonathan, I don't want to detract from the development of, but I have a question about water being used mechanically, water being used to create electricity, but what about water being used to create steam? Was there steam power in any of these mills? I mean, how did they heat them?
I don't know that exact answer, to be honest.
Because in inland mills, it was steam power that ran a lot of these old mills, and it was also used to heat them.
I don't know how much was electric. There was a lot of coal. Coal facilities in the Continental for a while was probably being heated with coal. I would, rather than venture to guess how all of them were heated.
Well, they got the boiler room down there on Lincoln Street, down by where Heinz Alley was. I imagine that was a heating source.
Right, but that would be a huge steam plant. I would imagine coal-fired steam.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Back in the good old days, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because electricity didn't come in until pretty near the beginning of the 20th century.
Coal was a major part of that. So these great old layouts of the Continental, and literally everything inside the U was the coal storage sitting around the banks.
In the bleacher, you had that very large smokestack, which would presumably be coal.
Yeah.
I'd just like to make a comment about how exciting I think this is. I've only lived here about 25 years, and right after I moved here, definitely, I had friends that came to visit, and I didn't really know what to show them, so I went to the chamber and asked them what could I show them in this area. They said, oh, Bates College, and then everything else was sent out of town to see something out of town. So this is very exciting to see all the things here.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the economic impact of recreational use of the river. And I think of the enormous economic impact of the head of the Charles Regatta on the Charles River in Boston, where they have crews and rowers from around the world. And we'll have, I have heard quotes of 500,000 spectators on this weekend in the end of October. It's a spectacular event. It just goes on over those 2 days with all kinds of levels of competition among the rowers, from world-class crews down to wicked paddlers. And we don't have the base of college and university rowing that the Boston area has. As a matter of fact, we don't have any here. But there's other kinds of recreational use of the river. That's image sticks in my mind, and whether it's those kind of flotations or canoes or whatever it might be, I think there's a real potential for the lodging industry and restaurants and campsites and the like, if we can. And as we know, it's been a long time before we're accustomed to seeing people actually out on the river, rather than trying to walk by and hold your nose and avoid it.
We could ask LL Bean to have a fishing camp where they bring people up here for a week while they learn how to fish.
There we go. The Hilton wouldn't mind that. To get to your question on the crew, you need at least a half mile of straight flat water to pull that off, which we don't really have in town. Most people don't know, Bates actually does host a regatta with Colby and Bowdoin. They do it on Gulf Island Pond, where you do have more than multiple miles of flat water. Bates has a very modest boathouse sitting in a very beautiful landscape just off of River Road in Green. They do host there.
John, I just want to remind, they do early spring training down in the lower, at the boat landing on Route 136 too.
But that's economic impact for the Durham get and go. We want to know those.
I want to address one thing you said, that you need river straightaway. The head of the Charles is actually on the curving parts of the river and not in the basin where they have their competitive crew racing in the spring. They have a different kind of competition. They won't have 4, 5, 6 crews out at one time, which you can do in that wide basin. And it's up, the competition is actually one crew against another up in the curves beyond Harvard Stadium. And so you get different kinds of competition.
I have a question about year-round access to the water too, like in the winter. What is it realistic that we could skate on some of the canals?
On the canals, probably. That's I didn't get into the canal acquisition piece, which is talk about how we'll be judged, how that deal gets negotiated is going to be significant. And I'll be blunt and say that the deal that Lewiston is putting on the table right now sells us far short. And that will sell us far short for the next 2 generations if it goes through. So I'm going to do what I can to slow it up and change the negotiating parameters. But it is what it is. The water rights are the big thing. So, you know, in the winter, depending on the need for water or rights for water, dropping the canal levels to a place where you could do that, I think probably a higher probability would be, especially with the master plan, there's talk of when Mill 5 comes down, now how that site gets repositioned and the potential for some sort of signature outdoor park, all-season outdoor park, where you could use access to water to actually build a skating circle for outdoor skating, which would probably be ideal, your ability to manage temperatures as opposed to the dynamic of getting people to climb down into the canal network itself. But the potential to use the canals for fishing derbies or for even paddling, an ultimate portage trail through the downtown as other communities have used their waterways is still there. Yeah.
Now, there was some talk about filling the canals a while back. I hope that doesn't happen.
You from Lewiston? Right, your city councilor.
No.
No, there's been a host of talk. I think Earl Shuttleworth from Maine Historic Preservation will probably jump in front of the first bulldozer. I'd be the second one to jump to see if we can more quickly. The master plan for the city of Lewiston actually says it's time for Lewiston to sort of respect the landscape those things were built in. And I showed you an early stereo view looking from the top of one of the towers of the Androscoggin looking north on Canal Street, where you have these great esplanades and these beautiful landscape fences with the trees and the lighting. There's a push to do that. It's going to be very expensive. And that's where if we're all, I guess don't pardon the pun, if we're all rowing in the same direction, if rather than having 6 or 7 or 8 siloed groups, we're sort of all working sort of cross-sector, I have every confidence that money will be found. Lowell wouldn't have believed it. They made it happen. You can say it's because Songus was in the right place at the right time. Well, serendipity happens. And it's probably a tens of millions of dollar proposition to bring those canals back. But when you think about setting the stage for that type of environment, if you're a private investor, you want to build some nice condos or townhouses in downtown Lewiston, most people right now would laugh like they laughed about sport fishing, LL Bean, downtown Lewiston. People love living near water. And if you've got a very attractive environment and a very reasonable real estate market and you're in a downtown, you wouldn't do it now where you've got chain link fences, some have barbed wire on them, guardrails. But if you have that landscape of the late 1800s, it's a very different phenomenon. So if the recommendation is not to fill them, I hope they don't. What will happen with how much water is left? Lewiston's proposing to give up almost all of their water rights. on top of paying NextEra and giving NextEra a significant property tax rebate. Remains to be seen. Those NextEra facilities net profit between $15 and $20 million a year by my last estimate. They're a multinational corporation based out of Florida. It's on top of the canal system. That's actually where they manage the entire Androscoggin River. They built a $5 million new headquarters in Hollowell in a wetland, and have abandoned that building. So I don't tend to lose a lot of sleep around NextEra. They have federal obligations. They may watch this video, so I send my best to Frank and Chad from NextEra. But there's a federal obligation. The Federal Power Act was passed because there were industrial users that wanted to control waterways. The water is owned by the people of Maine, and if you're going to have a right to use that water and alter its natural progression, you need to provide public benefit. And there's a significant assessment that goes into that. Public recreation is part of it. Scenic and aesthetic resources is part of it. Wildlife habitat is part of it. But those licenses are 50 years. So if you don't get it right, you'll be long retired before you get a second chance. And the Monty Hydro, the Lewiston Falls, when that was first licensed, that license comes up in less than a decade now. And it may seem like a long time, but it comes quick. When it was licensed in the mid-'80s, when there was a decision made that they'll pull, in essence, all of the water from the falls, the response was, no one's going to come to Lewiston to see water coming over the river. And if they want to, they can come in the spring. And that was a conclusion that most cities signed off on. I don't think you'd see the cities agreeing that never having water over the falls is okay. For a number of reasons, aesthetic and economic impact. They talked to the folks at the Hilton. They got a wedding planner coming in, and their first question is, how do you make the water come over the falls? And the answer is you can't unless you get a lot of rain on your wedding day. So there's a ton of moving parts. It's extremely complex, but fortunately there is a federal system, but you only get one bite, and then you're waiting 50 years to do it again.
Well, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
The enthusiasm he has generated will get some of you to ask if you can participate and help with what Jonathan's trying to accomplish. I'll tell you a little story. Auburn and Lewiston were hacked out of the wilderness, and Doug Hodge and I have done a lot of research on that, and our families were some of the people who hacked Lewiston and Auburn out of the wilderness. I had a great-grandfather, many times removed, who came here in 1776. And he tells a story about how he used to play with the Indian boys at the foot of the falls. And that they used to place bets with him, not money bets, but just who can excel. He said they were very, very physically able. And who could excel at walking across when the water was very low and go from one side to the other. Who could get across the quickest? And my great-grandfather all of a sudden realized that if he picked up two rocks that he could carry, it would keep his feet traction on the bottom, and he could beat the Indian boys across the river. Well, to get back to the wilderness that we had, it'll never happen. But I hope that folks like Jonathan and maybe some of us could make it happen. That we could get back some of that rural character that would make us enjoy the area more and draw others to enjoy it too. So thank you very much. If any of you aren't members, we'd encourage you to become members. The members of the society would love to have you join them. We have a lot of programs. Next month, one of the ancestors of Alonzo Garcelon is going to give a speech on Alonzo Garcelon. It's called Alonzo Garcelon, 1813 to 1906, The Man and His Times. And he was one of the probably more prominent movers and shakers that helped to make Lewiston at least what it was. And that will be at the annual meeting. The public is invited. There is a small fee for the dinner we serve. And we have a very brief meeting, but the lecture will be on Alonzo Garcelon, and you're all invited to come. There will be notices in the newspapers that will tell how much it costs and who you have to contact. Thank you very much.